Welcome to the Co-Creative Sessions, your access point for knowledge and expertise from artists, creatives, changemakers, designers, entrepreneurs, and community enthusiasts in the South Coast and beyond.
Whether you know it or not, your environment does play a big role in your work.
I'd recommend anytime you find something that's really effective, break it down.
The idea is to get started today. Avoid overthinking it.
The Co-Creative Sessions is funded by Mass Development TDI and the Barr Foundation as part of the TDI Creative Cities Initiative to boost arts-based economic development. This program is also supported in part by a grant from the New Bedford and Dartmouth local cultural councils, local agencies which are supported by the Mass Cultural Council, a state agency. And now, the Co-Creative Sessions. And thank you for joining us for the latest entry in the Co-Creative Sessions. I'm Scott Bishop. I'll be moderating tonight's session. Iva Brito is a licensed social worker, holds a master's degree in education, and finished her advanced graduate studies in expressive arts at Salve Regina University. Iva is a consummate creative whose talents run the gamut of artistic expression. In 2019, she was selected as Artist in Residence at the New Bedford Whaling National Historical Park. A visual and performing artist, Iva is also the author of the poetry book Essence, Tones, Whispers, and Shouts, and a contributing author in the book Cabo Verdean Women Writing Remembrance, Resistance, and Revolution. Iva established a women's center in a college setting, and her experiences in the arts as an educator, administrator, and activist led her to answer a spiritual calling by launching Iva Brito Consultancy. IBC Inc's mission is based on Afro-Indigenous roots that use the expressive arts to support and uplift women, children, and the community. If you have any questions for Iva, please drop them in the chat. We'll ask those questions in the flow of the session. We'll also have time for a Q&A after Iva's presentation. And now, here's Iva.
Thank you for that excellent welcome. As Scott mentioned, I'm an artist and I'm honored to be here today and to be one of the members of the Co-Creative Sessions. So I'm excited to share a little bit about me. I hope that this will be an interactive session. I'm going to start off a little bit by sharing a little bit about me and my artistry, and then I will also open it up for us to engage in some activities as well. I'm going to start off by sharing a little bit about me, and I thought the best way to do that is really by sharing the title of my book and what it's all about. I am the author of the poetry book you see on the screen, Essence, Tones, Whispers, and Shouts. And I often tell folks that I was shamed into writing a book. As I've grown in my poetry, I've done different events, and people would always ask me for a book. So eventually I said it has to happen, and this is what I birthed: Essence, Tones, Whispers, and Shouts. So you may ask yourself, why the title? I'm going to answer that for you right now. Essence. Essence speaks to my earth, my roots, my grounding, who I am as an individual, as an African woman. I was born in the Cabo Verde Islands that you see a picture of on our screen, which is on the west coast of Africa. And so that really shapes a lot of who I am and how I view the world, and always remembering the importance of our history and roots. So as what I did with the book is I organized the poems into these 4 different sections, essence all relating something to do with my history, my roots, and my origins, and my earth. The next section of the book relates to a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, which is tones. That relates to my water, if you will, and that is the artistry within me. And art flows through me in many different ways. I am a visual artist, which you'll see some of my work. I am a performing artist, a poet, and I believe that we are all creative beings, and through creativity we connect. So the tones was all the different ways that art flows through me, and the water flow of art that goes in many ways in how I connect with myself and others. Whispers. Whispers speaks to my connection with spirituality, with my connection to Mother Nature, with our ancestors, and that's a really big part of the work that I do. It's really how can we use arts for healing, and the intersectionality of arts and healing to create change and really ground ourselves in the work that we do through the arts. So that's all those poems in there relate to that concept in some form. And then we have shouts, and shouts is my fire, if you will. That speaks to my commitment to social justice and activism. I come from a set of parents that always instilled that in me, and all the work that I've done, whether it's gender equity, racial equity, it's always in alignment with really social justice and equity in the work that we do. So in that image, you see some of the women that have been pioneers in the equity movement, like Angela Davis and others. And so that title really encompasses who Eva is. When I was thinking of a title for the book, I said, what could this be? And that was what I came up with, Essence, Tones, Whispers, and Sounds. So hopefully that gives you a little understanding of who I am as an individual, as an artist, and my beliefs and values and the work that I do. So in 2019, as mentioned, I was an art in resident in New Bedford Whaling National Park, which was an amazing experience. I recommend it to all the folks that may be on the call that are artists or considering it. It's a 3-month experience in which you really get a chance to explore your artistry, and they pay, it's a paid art in resident, and it also provides you the experience to really look at how you can grow as an artist. And for me, what I decided to do, amongst other things, was to explore the different art forms that I'm dabble in, and that being the visual arts and the writing arts of poetry. So I decided to pick about 10 poems in my book and see if I could convert those poems to visual imagery. And that's something I had never done. I have done poems and I have created imagery through painting and multimedia facets, but I had never, usually I would pick a poem and convert it into an image. What we often do, right, is, I know for me, is I will pick an image and that will help me to be inspired and to inform my art. So this was the opposite, and I wanted to challenge myself. All this work that I have done in terms of arts and healing and poetry also led me to create IBC, which stands for Iva Brito Consultancy, which is really an intersectionality looking at the healing arts and how we can provide healing spaces for our community. And that's the work that I'm doing in many facets. And you can find out more about that on my website, ivabrito.com. So as I was saying before, I wanted us to engage in an activity. So if folks are willing to engage with me, hopefully you're not just here to hear me talk, but you're willing to talk as well. And as part of the conversation, I would like, if you have a chance, we're going to start off with what we usually do, or what I have done in the past. Is I'm going to show you an image like the one here, and then I'm going to ask you to, real quick, nothing that's going to take a lot of time, give me a phrase or something that comes to mind, because we're looking at these two different forms of artistry and words and how they can connect. So this is one way in terms of using the art to inform the words, and then we'll flip it. And what I did with the art, the word to inform the art. So this is the first image, and I have a few to go. If folks want to just share like a real quick, what word comes to mind when you see this image? I'm a nature lover, so this was something that was really drawn. And I studied expressive arts while I was at Salve Regina, and I loved a course which was arts and eco-consciousness, was really the marriage of arts and nature, which is a lot of the work that I do. And this image really spoke to me, and I wanted to share that with you today. So any thoughts, anyone in the room, on the first impression when you get to this image?
Renee chimed in the chat, wild woman.
Oh, yes.
And I had one, sleeping earth mother.
I love that. And that sounds so poetic too, right? So that marriage of language and imagery is always there. So a whole different feel, but we know there's power in imagery. So what are the words that maybe real quick come to mind? And this image is in the African American Museum. I know that's a strong image, but just how image can evoke emotion in words.
Renee chimed in, contained surrender.
Powerful, yes, contained surrender.
Lionel Frechette also chimed in for that last slide, drowning in a stone ocean.
I feel like I could write a poem about that, drowning in a stone ocean. That was a great one. Thank you for contributing, Lionel. This one's a little less, maybe feeling on your conscious and body, but still hopefully evokes some thought.
Renee says, water flowing, freedom, life.
Water, flowing, freedom, life, right? I like that, right? And we can't live in this world without water.
And Lionel chimed in with clean.
Clean. Love it. Thank you. This woman, I do not know this woman, but it's one of the 3 images online that I was able to acquire, and I thought it was a beautiful image.
Lionel chimed in with brilliance.
I agree, beautiful.
And if I can chime in, what I saw was pride and vulnerability.
All right, so you see that, she has this strong kind of a stance and exposure, but there's that vulnerability also in her eyes, which is just that juxtaposed, beautiful African queen there. So switching it up again, trying to keep you fresh, something totally different. I think if I would, this may be on the tip of infinity. Swinging on the tip of infinity might be the title I would give to this one.
Lionel says, astronaut's tether.
I like it. We have a great group today.
Renee added, swinging out over the universe.
Imagine if we could, right? That'd be pretty cool. Let's go swing in the universe today. So this is a structure that I also thought was very cool and unique how it's positioned. So I wanted to share this one. I might title this one Golden Temple of Time.
Eva, I had something in a similar vein. Golden Palace in a city of glass and concrete. Lionel says, flights of fancy and pragmatics.
It's interesting how the structures that are around us impact our view and our feel, right? Seeing that in the middle of our city or another city, just is so different, right, than what we usually see.
Renee says, golden top in concrete city.
I like it. All right. This is another image I have for you.
I see umbrella chaos.
I would go with colorful unknown journey.
Renee says, rainbow umbrellas in array.
This looks like a piece of art with all the different colors meshing. Switching it on you again, a little bit of a different feel to this image.
First words that came to me were prayer and water.
I know, I don't know that they all connect, but I was thinking colorful prayer of smoke.
Lionel wrote, waters of contemplation.
I like that as well. So I don't know if you're just saying or if you're writing them down. I think a lot of these that are coming out are pretty cool. And so I may challenge you if you would like to, maybe these can be poems and so forth. The imagery has the power to really invoke different words for us. So I'm switching it up now into a different image that has a whole different feel, a little bit maybe more expansive than the other one.
I love what Lionel just wrote. Peephole.
Heel. I love it as well. I was thinking pathway to, I don't even know, pathway to infinity, pathway to adventure, pathway to the unknown. It's like there's a path, but you sure don't know where it's leading to.
Renee added, giant rock and tiny man.
I love it. So hopefully you're having fun with these images. I want to do one more that can invoke some thoughts and words.
Lionel just stole the one I was going to say. This is great. VHSIs. He put slashes between every letter.
I know some depending on the generation, folks don't even know what those are anymore. It's like, what are those?
Renee says video cassette mask.
I would say camera into time. Cool. So that was a fun activity, hopefully to get folks engaged and thinking about how the language of imagery and words can interact with one another. And as I mentioned, this has been something I've gone to many times. If I am commissioned to do a poem, I remember there was an event at the Whaling Museum to honor veterans. And even though I have a grandfather that was a veteran, it's not something that is lived experience for me and was kind of far removed to a certain extent. So I looked at a lot of images of veterans and war and, to invoke that, and that's helped me to inform the poem that I wrote for that event. So very often, as we do with artistry, is we'll use different forms of art to help one another. So what I did, as I mentioned, for the art in residency, and what today's conversation is about, using the written form to inform a visual form. So I'm going to actually now share my own artwork. So these poems, all of them except for one, I believe, are in my book, Essence, Tones, Whispers, and Shouts, that I mentioned. And this one is under tones, like that image said, the flowing of imagery. Actually, this poem, I was asked to speak at a graduation for a local middle school, Roosevelt Middle School. And so I wanted something that would hopefully inspire the students that were graduating. And so this is the image that came out of that event. And so I'll read that to you. And what I want you to do as we do this, I want you to process this with me. So I have this poem, and then I have to create an image. So think about, let's first start off with the poem. So I'm going to read it for you. Like waterfalls, let it be the source of your dreams, providing for and connecting with every ocean, lake, river, and stream. Let it be your means of inspiration, steady in its flow, guiding your path for tomorrow. It might remind you of Langston Hughes, of Dreams Deferred, kind of a small and sweet poem. And as I mentioned, it was the point of that poem was to inspire. So now I have the task, and I'm going to ask you guys to share that. If you had this poem in front of you and asked to create an image, what would that perhaps look like? What direction would you go in? And I'll share my thoughts on it. But this was, again, a new experience that how do you create something? And I'll give you different ones. But what are thoughts of folks, maybe if you had to create an image from this, what you would create?
What I could see, Eva, is, waterfall at the top, transforming into a bed or a blanket, with, the head of the person at the bottom. And since you mentioned, ocean, lake, river, stream, maybe, it's a woman, or it could be a man with long hair, but the hair is kind of flowing out as well into a river, into a stream. But, making the waterfall at the top, flowing into a blanket or bed, and going from there.
I love that. I love that.
Thank you.
Kind of going from the water to the human aspect. Any other thoughts? And then I'll share what I actually did in my thought process with it.
Kyle says flowing water with various levels and refraction points, still water to rough flowing streams.
I like it. So everyone's right with the water piece, right? Clearly, when talking about waterfalls. So I wanted with this one to create something that was resonant of something like a waterfall. So this is the image I created. I really like to work with texture now as I grow as an artist. So if you saw this like close inside where it looks like where the waves would be crashing, you could feel it have a little bubbles. So it has a lot of texture, this piece, and I used resin. So I wanted a piece that was water flowing. I thought of that idea of maybe having river streams, but in the end, they're all water. So the the momentum and movement of water is what inspired me. And that poem also had that theme of water being a constant inspiration and movement and flow. So this is the image that I created, which is now not in my home, but so it was this. So any thoughts on that image? It wasn't, I like your idea, Scott, though, but as I will say, I had a lot of things to consider when doing this. And sometimes it's one, I had a 3-month span to do 10 poems. So I had to think about capacity. I had to think about, did it really convey all of the poem? And I felt like just, I could have drawn, waterfall, a river, or something that was more specific, but I just said water flowing will capture that image and that movement that I try to get with the ocean, and looking like it could be a waterfall, it could be in the middle. So that was kind of my goal in this.
Well, what I love is you could go the direction that, I went in, which is more literal. It's like taking elements and combining them, like the waterfall and a person in bed. I'm just going to quickly share Lionel's as well. I would create an image of a person sitting at the bottom of a river, looking up with the waterfalls rush above, peacefully like a smooth stone. But what I want to say, and that's a lovely image, what I want to say about this, though, is there's the other direction you go in, which is more abstract, although Dina points out in the chat, it's like an overhead image of the ocean. And Kyle mentions the colors bring out the depth out from the viewer. It's really awesome. So there's a lot of ways you could interpret the words, and it's really great to see, here's a really beautiful kind of abstract, but it's pointing towards the water imagery as well.
Right. And I definitely wanted to look at the expansiveness of water and like the ocean and having that kind of feel to it. So that was kind of my thought, like if I could perhaps narrow it down to a specific body of water or something, that it might take away the intent or, inspiration behind that poem.
Lionel added, it evokes imagery of details and inlets with all of it still being water.
Cool. So that's one. So I'm going to share another poem here. So calling, and this poem speaks to what I believe every human being has, is a calling on this earth to do something amazing, to follow your spirit and to create something that is divine to you. And as I mentioned with the spirit, with the Whispers, talks about my connection with spirituality, with nature, with connecting with our ancestors. So this is one of the poems under the essence piece, and it's called Calling. The sun rises along with my soul, pushing on my cells to grow, to release this intuitive molecular message that has no form but its own, unique as a raindrop, abundant as the rainforest, rich-rooted in the soil of our universe, metamorphosis of past lives, genders, names, locations, tsunami gravitational pull of many, many moons ago, pushing on this warrior message with the urgency of right now, right here in the present moment, to manifest this ancestral calling, divine light of love before sunset. So that's that poem, and I can't see all the words, so I'm going by part of it memory. And so any thoughts on the poem, or if you had this poem, which I had, which is a lot more complex than our previous poem, and create something that would exemplify this poem and possibly its essence?
I don't know what I would specifically create, Eva, but what I do get out of it is there's a lot of the macro and micro. So you have the sun, but you have cells, you have the raindrop and the rainforest. You have the sense of, the person I am, but also where I and we all came from. So I think if I were going to create something, I would see how could I do something that combines that, really close-up view with that much more expansive view.
Thank you for that. I will say some of my process in doing this work, and if you decide to challenge yourself to do something similar, was one, I had to make sure whatever image I created had the essence of the poem, not so much had the literal meaning and literal whatever I put, but the essence of it was captured in it. And for this piece, it was really cumbersome of a lot of different things, as you mentioned. I'm looking at the macro, I'm looking at the micro, I'm looking at how expansive we are and how we transform, looking at the metaphor from sunrise to sunset being the lifespan and how we can change within that and having more, previous life. So I knew for this, I wanted something that was not going to be linear, but that really was encompassing of many things.
Lionel did add something in the chat. All of the elements, fire, water, earth, water again, urgency of air, fire.
All right, so drum roll, I will share with you what I created. So this picture here, again, lots of texture if you had this in front of you. And I tried in the bottom of it to talk about that we are the soil of the universe is one of the lines, meaning that we come from this golden nurturing universe and we come from a golden roots that are really rich. So I wanted to really exemplify that. And sun being one of the key things, that sun rising. But I didn't want to just go there with the sun. It's encompassing and going around the universe coming in on one side and having that metamorphosis of the universe and being part of the universe with the abstract. And then also the groundingness of looking at the forest, looking at the trees and how we are immersed in that. So that was part of my thought process, and having that white feather, which is symbolic of looking at respect, and as many cultures that being the high, the white feather representing divine wisdom and knowledge. And so putting that feather there was also really intentional, and that connection of that line in the middle, that there's always, regardless of all this flow, there's that divine light in the middle. So that was part of my thought process in this image. So I don't know, folks. And then, like I said, if you had up close, you can almost see like part of it looks almost like cellular in the design of it, that you can see the texture of it and flowing from one to another.
Renee did chime in with an image right as you were bringing this slide up, which is someone standing and the sun above.
That's definitely an option to go with it. Like I said, I wanted this to encompass many different things because the poem, and sometimes that's the route I went, is encompassing a lot of different aspects and components that I address in the poem. And sometimes it's addressing just one thing like the water. So this one, I decided to do that to another one. And this is the two images together. So you can see some of the lines that really go from one to another. This one, again, is a poem in the book under the music section. This, I was asked to write a poem for a Valentine's event that they had here. I've done with my poetry some jazz and poetry nights, and I did this event with the late Armstead Christian, and he asked me to create a piece for this. And it had this kind of feel of a little bit of erotic poetry. And so since I knew I was going to do this event with music and poetry, I decided to dabble in a little bit at looking at all these different instruments and the relationship between music and poetry. And this is what I came up with for this event, and is in the poem. So sometimes I like to share the history of the poem, when it came about. So this one is called Music. From the beginning, I was hooked. Baritone like the flute, its soothing flow had me flowing down the Nile, slowly entering into denial's abyss. His fingertips tiptoed down my spine like that of the clarinet, a sensual unwind. He paid attention to every curve of my violin shape, pressing the key to my soul, playing, like that of the piano's melody, causing vibrations to flow. His African drumbeat had me suspended in air in a heaven of sinful desires, like doing backflips on a tightrope with one foot in heaven and one foot in hell, unable to tell the difference. My loose or fine-tuning my insides, tightening and liberating my vocal cords at the same time. Like the sounds of the trumpet, it hit deep in my soul, allowing my ear columns to vibrate like that of the trombone. I was an open love valve, open to his love melody, his mouthpiece, allowing him to play in any tune, creating our own musical composition like that of the Congo. You punctured my core, making me want more and more of this amour melody, my musical love note with the power of an orchestra and the sophistication of a fine tune. He played me. So that is the poem. Like I said, I was intentional to try to use a lot of different instruments and look at, playing with the love making, playing with poetry for this event that I had to do. So if you had this poem and any comments on the poem, or what might you think would be an image you would create?
I would look at something with a man and a woman and seeing, is there an instrument that could, kind of be like in the gap between them, kind of like unifying, but also in that space between them. Kyle says, flowing vibes resonating from a person into the environment around them.
So I will say this one was one that I really thought, all of them I thought about, but I was really thinking, like, how do I convey this essence of this poem into an image? Because it was a lot. I thought about one of the things I remember when I'm doing my sketches, I thought about putting all these different images that I speak, the clarinet, the violin, the trombone, like maybe putting all those different instruments in a piece that were almost like a collage of something. So I thought of that, and I started to go that route, but then I felt like it was not the route I wanted to go, and I didn't need to go that literal with it. Again, it's making sure I had the essence of it. So I will share the piece that I created. And I played on the violin shape. At one point I was gonna put strings. If you did see this, there's texture on these pieces, especially what's in her hair. And I thought about the beauty of the woman's body. And to me, that's one of the most beautiful things, and how it's curvaceous, but also, and looking at lovemaking and how, so I just thought this would convey a lot of what the poem was about in a simple way, as opposed to going so many different directions. So this is a piece, and it's I feel like this is when I've had exhibited my work. It brings a lot of conversation, this piece. So I don't know if there's any thoughts.
Kyle chimed in. He says, I love this one. This was the first image I saw on your site. Super cool. And I actually knew which image it was when I saw the poem, because I got to see your work at the end of your artist in resonance. And I also want to acknowledge Lionel, who chimed in before this this slide, the image of sound waves intertwining.
And I think if I had more time, it would be interesting, like, to try different approaches of different things, because you could go so many different ways with a poem. But I wanted to go really simple, and maybe simple is not the right word, but I wanted to find something that was still powerful and conveyed the poem's essence without having to do multiple different images in one.
I think it has that clarity of just being really direct. Like, people get that image right away.
Right. And so that's sensual, sexual, beautiful, and musical in its own, and all in one. Okay, so, and that's the poem next to it. This actually is not in the book. I wrote this poem for a poetry contest that was looking at darkness, and I thought I was inspired. So this one I will share with you, and then we'll do the same. So this one's called Eternity poem. And like I said, there was a theme for this poetry contest that they were looking at the relation of darkness and what that means. And so this is what I wrote. In the vastness of all eternity I lie, nested somewhere between nowhere and everywhere, still yet vibrating 1,000 lifetimes, void of timelines, a black and white celestial masquerade, wholesome joyous black abyss, light galaxy serenade, one with all that exists, floating waterfalls ignite the volcano within, erupting black lava love rocks detached, liberating synchronicity flow, exposing every part of my naked soul, every dimension, creator, and texture of goddess within. I ride its black eternal flow to the cosmos. And this piece too, a lot was about different emotions that come with the darkness, good, and playing that juxtapose of the beauty and also the sometimes sadness or unknown that comes in the darkness. So thoughts on the poem, or perhaps what you would create, again, thinking about keeping its essence, incorporating some of the imagery that evokes from the poem, and then just creating a beautiful piece of art was my intentionality in this.
Eva, my immediate response was the cosmos in the shape of a person.
Somewhat close. Well, I'll share so people aren't. This is the image that came about. So there is that shape of a person within the cosmos. And if you look up close, there's some rocks textures in this and looking at it. And also that divine light coming in from the third eye chakra there above the woman's eye. You can see only half her face, so it's like she's within that cosmos and is part of that universe, is the universe. Any thoughts or questions on that one?
I love how it's cosmic and earthy at the same time.
Yeah, I wanted to put some like rocks, and maybe that's a little crater, maybe it's not, but really wanted to play with that texture too. Any other thoughts on that one?
Lionel says it's beautiful, the play of colors and light.
Maybe I'll do one more. So this poem is under my earth, the essence piece, and Nostada translates to our land in my native tongue of Cape Verdean Creole. And so this piece really spoke to, I was born in the Cape Verde Islands. I came here as a young girl, but have gone many times, and I've seen the transformation of the culture, the land, literally, as new hotels are being built. And so I wanted to speak to that and making sure that we don't forget it's true, that we respect the mother nature and the earth that we have there. And one of the things that is known within the culture is a conte d'orge, which is a black and white necklace with beads with white dots on it. And each of them are uniquely made. And as an African legend goes, the kanta, which was the necklace, will protect you from evil. So when I say the conte d'orge, that hopefully will protect us. So we'll close with this being our last one we do, and I'll share the poem. My ancestors whispered to me their stories. My lips spoke their names: Boa Vista, Santiago, Santantão, Maio, e Fogos. It's Dez Ilhas, Mother's Dez Timor, which translates to these 10 islands like my 10 fingertips. Sal, Santa Luzia, San Nicolau, San Vicente, y Brava, each with its own essence, all within me. From the lava rocks of Fogo to the white sands of Maio, from San Vicente's Coladeira to Santiago's Batuque. I sway in your rhythm. I caress myself in sunset. I slide down Boa Vista's sand dunes. I elevate to Santantão's peak. I bloom in Brava's garden. And at a distance, I see my silent sister, Santa Luzia, watching over me. Finally, I land to open arms at Cabral's door in silence. As I transcend in this vast sea of history engraved in me, selfishly, I want to keep you hidden. As I'm fearful of exposure sins, I want you hidden like my secret hiding place, where childhood memories lies, and bright blue skies of fading faces, and my roots are painted in vibrant hues of red, yellow, and green, and a grandmother's kiss on the forehead makes time stand still. Sunlight rays darken skin tone and enlighten souls, and as your beauty transcends time and distance, like a farewell of a childhood's innocence into womanhood's truth. All that I ask is for you to wear this gift, this conte de oj, around your soul, molded by ancestors' sweat and tears, engraved with mortabeza smiles of yesterday, remembrance of our ancestors' whispers. Nostada Cabo Verde, Cabo Scarcity, Conte de oj, which translates to our land, Cape Verde. Don't forget your Conte de oj. So this piece is really special because it talks about, like I mentioned, my homeland, and I mentioned all the different islands. Cape Verde is made up of 10 islands, and how each of them have their own fields. So some of them Fogo, the lava rocks of Fogos. There's a volcano on that island. Some of the other islands are more picturesque, known for their white sand beaches, as Fogo has dark black sand beaches, and some of them known for their history of music and their culture. So each one of them is almost like different states in the United States, all very different in their culture and feel. But in the end, knowing that we need to protect the beauty of that culture and land before it is forsaken. So that's the poem. Any thoughts on the poem or what you possibly could create?
I feel like this poem could be a series of paintings because it's so rich. And just, that early image of these 10 islands, like my 10 fingertips, like that to me could be its own painting by itself. It's so vivid.
Oh my goodness, you're inspiring me right now.
Oh,
I'm like, that would be a cool image of having your hand represent those images. I love that. I didn't even think of that, but that's not the direction I went in, but I think that's a beautiful thought. Well, I will share. So this is the image. And again, lots of texture. And for this one, I didn't feel like I could just do one thing like the music that I just had one thing, because there was so much that encompassed the different islands. They're all so different. So you see the lava rocks of Fogo, because like I mentioned, there's a volcano on that island. And so that flow of the volcano, you see the ocean, some of them having white sand beaches, and all of them being islands, and looking at the mountains and the sunset. And then that necklace is the conte de oj, the conte de oj wrapping around the islands. You see someone there, a woman getting serenaded by a man. There's a very hot, it's near the equator, so it's very often that you see someone underneath a tree, maybe singing, and a big part of the culture is the music. And it's almost like, the sunset is dripping, that crying that we don't forget. And that's kind of how I felt, that this is sadness, that things were changing, not always for the good. And so asking our ancestors to kind of look over us. And so it's a lot in this image, but I was trying to encompass a lot of the poem. So any thoughts?
There's a lot in the image, but it doesn't feel busy. I love how it feels like it's like a diamond, like it's faceted, like these divisions kind of highlight different parts of the poem, but it's a unified whole too, with that necklace coming right across the middle. It's just lovely.
Thank you. And I did think about the aesthetics of that too, as an artist, that I wanted it to be a lot, but I wanted it to have balance. So I tried to kind of section it off, that it was all had its different pieces, with the top part being the sky, the ancestors, that being a big part of it, but also having different components of the different islands. That golden wall there, kind of looking at what the possibilities that could be moving forward as well. Hopefully you were able to kind of walk with me in that process of going one art form of the written word into the imagery, and how we could potentially, because that space that you have something, what do you do? That's the exciting and possibilities of what that could happen. So I'm open to questions if folks have any questions or thoughts on the presentation or anything that I spoke about today.
Eva, I noticed on a couple of the slides, it looked like it highlighted particular lines. Was that a part of the process, or like highlighting certain images as you read the poem to kind of see, what am I going to pull out of this and put into the painting?
When I do, when I write poems, there's usually some parts that I feel like are, if you will, the highlights and then undertones. So that is part of the work. I think it might have just been more of a technical thing of trying to make things fit. So it wasn't in that piece, but within the work, it was definitely highlighting what was most important. And like the last piece that I showed, it was really getting that essence, because that poem came out of a feeling of a girl that loves her homeland, that's been in Virgin Beaches, and now they have hotels on the beaches, and they have different tourists that come in, don't always respect the land, don't always pay equitable wages for the workers, and just this change of culture that I was kind of like, let's not forget who we are, where we come from, and the beauty of our land and that sadness. So that was kind of the conveying of that image of, let's remember that our ancestors have worked on this land and connect with that.
So it's not just highlighting specific images, it's like you're capturing kind of underlying themes in the poem and
Absolutely.
saying, how am I going to bring that into the picture and communicate it?
That was always my first thought. How do I get the underlying theme? How do I get the essence? How I get so that whatever the image is in the end, that is still there, that I wasn't willing to compromise the aesthetics of whether I create a tree or I create an ocean, or that could change, but I wanted to be able to look at that image, look at the poem, and that essence is still the same.
One thing I did want to add is hearing you read the poems adds this extra dimension as well. There's like a rhythm and cadence to how you're speaking them that brings even more out than what we see on the page. And I really very much appreciate that.
Thank you for that. And I agree that, there's something powerful about the spoken word, and, having that rhythm and flow to go with it changes the dynamic, not only for myself, but even hearing others, like hearing the vocals that come with the poem. And I try to convey the power, the flow with all the different poems that I do, and changing it, being intentional about what words I stress and don't stress, so people can really get the most out of the poem.
Thanks for joining us for the Co-Creative Sessions. Stay tuned for upcoming sessions and view previous sessions in the series by visiting the Co-Creative Center's events page at cocreativenb.org. The Co-Creative Sessions is funded by Mass Development TDI and the Barr Foundation as part of the TDI Creative Cities Initiative to boost arts-based economic development. This program is also supported in part by a grant from the New Bedford and Dartmouth Local Cultural Councils, local agencies which are supported by the Mass Cultural Council, a state agency. We look forward to seeing you at the next Co-Creative Session.